There are a lot of things to be fans of, to like, to not like. Especially nowadays, there's a lot more sci-fi and fantasy books and novels. For really everybody. I mean, there's the Hunger Games for women. There's good old Star Trek for your traditional nerds. But one that really kind of runs the gambit of people is Harry Potter, and I'm also a fan of that. And so I'm gonna just make a web series, about all the Harry Potter books and movies. Not just a review, but also kind of analyze it and think a little more deeply about them. So what even is Harry Potter? For those who don't know, because I was in this boat for quite a while myself, I didn't come to the franchise till much later. Basically, it's a guy who, feels put upon and then finds out that there's this whole other world and that he not only fits in it, he fits in it really well and does quite well in it. And so that's basically the genesis of the show, or the series, and just going from there. What this other world is magic wizards, flying on brooms, and whatnot. But really where I think the series has a major strength is that could just be a metaphor for, so many different things. And so you could really plug in, what you would want it to be into that. So that, I think, is, why it's such a universally loved thing, because, if we all, have feelings of, I don't, feel good in this environment, I have, this and this wrong. If I just, manage to get over to, the promised land of over there, then everything would be good. And so that is kind of what J.K. Rowling was tapping into when she started this series, which is a very good, strong, thing to start with. And so, that was just, a very good idea. And, it was a very, broad idea, all of, magic, because that's, such a large concept that then she could, drill down and, find her, pieces that, she liked talking about and make a, story out of that. So that's, all very, good, strong things. And then she, did manage to come up with some, very wonderful, very colorful characters of, Dumbledore, the wise old man who's also a bit eccentric. And then managed to, make him not just automatically good and pure and whatnot. And Hermione, as kind of, the opposite of Harry, of, she's, got everything together but lacks, the more social graces. And Ron, who's, kind of the party animal, but is the opposite of Harry in that he's, poor but has, a lot of family, as opposed to Harry, who's, an orphan, and the little bit of family he has, he hates. So, there's, that was a good dynamic of, the, main trio, and then, the teachers, for the most part, are, quite colorful. McGonagall, who can, turn into a cat, and Severus Snape, who, you never quite know what's going on with him. So, it was a very colorful, rich world that, she eventually managed to build. For me, it was not automatically getting into Harry Potter. I didn't even become a fan of it until, honestly, they were done. But I kept hearing about it. I kept, seeing things in like other pieces of media. On Disgaea, one of the names that pops up, that you can name a female character is Hermione. So many, jokes leak into other sources. There's so many pages on TV tropes that it got me curious because I did not have a very good first experience with Harry Potter way back in the day, which was, the Philosopher's Stone, which, I have those problems with that. And then, ironically enough, the last book, Deathly Hallows, of just, writing and thinking and philosophizing, with it. Oddly enough, one of the major people who really liked it was my mom. She works at the time worked at a middle school in Northern California, and she just loved it and was kind of evangelizing for it. And so when I picked it up for the first time, trying to read it, was trying to see the first movie, it just did not grab me. Ironically enough, the best way to kind of the best example of this is kind of the South Park episode about Lord of the Rings, because that was the other major thing going on, at the time, where you see like all the kids, rather play Lord of the Rings than Harry Potter, and so I was kind of in that camp. But then I grew up, became more mature. Went to film school for a little while. Hopefully we'll go back someday. And, gave it another shot. And, I'm really personally glad I did. But, I'm not gonna lie and say that the, series is perfect. It does have some major flaws. But all in all, it's a really well-constructed book series and movie series. So some of the things that was stopping me from getting into, Harry Potter as a series, mostly is just problems with the first book and movie, which I want to get out of the way, now, just as a whole, which the biggest one is that Harry Potter just at first seemed like such Mary Sue. I mean, he just so he gets bullied a little, and then all of a sudden he's just this rock star. He has his personal giant manservant beat up the people he doesn't like and give him pig's tails, and his uncle gets his comeuppance without Harry having to do anything, and then they move on to the Wizarding World where everyone just automatically loves him because he's Harry Potter, and he hasn't even done anything. Which, and before anybody criticizes me, I know The Boy Who Lived, is what they're referring to it and whatnot, but just the way they get into it in universe, and to us, the audience, it just is, I don't know, it just kind of rubbed me kind of the wrong way of just, all your problems, you don't actually have to fix them. It's just, it comes off as the worst of cliched, Disney princess BS of, Hagrid, his fairy godmother, shows down and takes him to the ball. And it's just like, okay. That's the start. And then immediately finds out that not only, is he famous and everybody loves him, but then he's rich. Apparently he has vaults of gold. So woohoo! And, his dead parents are the coolest thing ever, and, had no flaws, which I know later, gets changed, but just from book one, it just, it just kind of, rubbed me the wrong way, and it just made it hard to, like Harry Potter, because he went from rags to riches without doing anything. Oh, and then he's also, a sports star. On top of all that, then it turns out he just happens to also be the greatest, thing that happened to Quidditch, since broomsticks. Like, what? And so, it was so simple and so routine that it just, irked me. Especially in the movie, because they cut out a lot of the graying, things that, made it, more tolerable. But it just seemed like Harry is this, Mary Sue. He gets everything he wants. The only thing that, is even trying to stand up against him is either, the clearly evil Voldemort or little Malfoy, who's just a bully, who just is this one-dimensional non-factor who doesn't really stop him from doing anything. All he does is, get him in just the right little bit amount of trouble to, keep any kind of plot moving. And it didn't grab me. It didn't, get me going for it, at the time. And the other major thing is that it had a number of things that just seemed weird for weird sake. Of, like, why would there be a jelly bean that tastes like vomit? Why would you make that? Why is that a thing? Like, oh, look how weird it is. And it just took, it just ruined my suspension of disbelief, which, if you're a storyteller of any kind, and especially a filmmaker, it just, I don't know, it's hard to describe those little details that you just go, Nugh! It can take you out of a movie. Also, the chocolate frogs. Like, why would candy that is now alive and jumping around, why would you want to eat a living frog? That's made of chocolate. That just sounds so gross and weird and bizarre. And I know it's supposed to be just a small symbol of how things are different in the world that he's going into, but it just struck me as just, well, we have to do something weird, so here's something weird. And, so that really took it out of it for me. And, even when it first came out, and, I hadn't been to film school or anything yet, it seems so formulaic of, we need to set up, these things, because they'll come back later, of Ron's good at chess, Hermione's smart, and Harry can, fly and find something. And and the mystery wasn't that good in the first one, and just, a lot of things that took me out of it. But as the series went on, all those things, got improved on. Malfoy became an actual, character, with motivations. The whole Malfoy family. His father Lucius, became an actual, person, with things to do. So, that was, that made it much better. There were, most of the depth came from the side characters, not Mary Sue Potter. Things like, Dobby, of there is an underclass, and that are not being treated well by their overlord, Malfoys. Well, and the idea that the way Dobby tries to help, to anybody else would seem crazy, but but in his mind, it makes logical, non-human sense. things like that are what, got me going. I think I'm probably one of the, 1% of Harry Potter fans whose one of their favorite books is The Chamber of Secrets. I know, for some reason, everybody seems to not like that book. I personally, thought it was great. I liked, the mystery of that one, came together much better, and I'm going to talk more about, each individual book, as we go. But, that one just, seemed like that J.K. Rowling improved a lot more. Harry actually has a fight. Granted, he doesn't really have any magic still, but, that was, less irksome. That was the other thing with, the Philosopher's Stone. He never does any magic. He's been at a magic school for a year, and he never casts a spell on screen. Yeah, but, but, like I say, J.K. Rowling, did get phenomenally better even just by the second book, and, started fleshing things out, and, we actually got to see a lot more of the Weasley family, and you got to see that, there are actually people in the world that she's made of, the wizarding folk, which, I'm going to go ahead and, talk about this now. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I mean, I don't want to be offensive to those, who are, and have them tune out my video, but just think about it a little bit more. And I know reality is confusing and can be strange, and there are such things as coincidences that seem too good to be true. I mean, I'll admit all of that, right now. Bam. But at the same time that there's a secret government, Bilderberg group, other world out there that's controlling everything, in secret. And, there's, reptiles that, can shapeshift and look like our leaders. I mean, if you don't follow the news at all, I guess maybe you could think that. Or, if you were back from, the 1940s, when I guess they could keep certain things under wraps, like FDR not being able to walk, or JFK having lots of sex with people. I guess if you want to extrapolate that out, and that there's a secret shadow government, but if you look at the news media now, they don't really want to keep secrets. In fact, there's often more of a problem with leaking, and we know way too much, including, Geraldo putting troop movements on the air, and having names of having the real names of spies, get leaked out, and, things like that, where I don't know how you can, keep a moon landing under wraps with nobody talking about it, or no mysterious deaths come to light, or anything, or, how you keep a 9/11, under wraps, or things like that, and so I personally don't understand how those secret magic worlds work, to them. So when you see it in fiction, for the most part, I just roll my eyes, because, they have just such obvious problems. The only two exceptions I'll make, because they do it and they give the shadow government what they would need to do it, would be the Men in Black, with Will Smith and what's his name? Tommy Hilfiger? No. Tommy Lee Jones. And, because they have the ability to erase people's memories, so that when it inevitably, starts to come out, they can patch a leak into it. And so then the other one would be Harry Potter. They have the ability, through magic of, having, the right amount of invisibility and memory erasing, and, the power of, and, people, and it being so crazy that, even small leaks wouldn't be able to, do much damage because no one would believe them. So, this world, I could buy in a lot more readily that the Harry Potter world is a secret and can be maintained as a secret. And, and even then, once she got up and running as to how the magical world works, it made a lot more sense than how other fantasy worlds like the Rothschilds supposedly work, where I guess they, sit on a throne of human skulls and count money and just do the evil in the background and whatnot. And, so, that was a major plus, for me to get into this, series. And, because they don't have everything fleshed out of, how the entire wizard economy works. But, there's a government, there's a prison, because, there are lawbreakers. There's a way to take away, the powers, which is, a key thing. There's, even simple things like newspapers and banks and, the kind of connective tissue that you would need in order to make this an actual, somewhat functioning world. Granted, she, cuts out, a lot of things. There's not mention of wizard factories or wizard accountants or anything like that. That you would also need, but, it's geared towards children. And so, certain, liberties are, going to be taken. So, it... I personally have really grown to love it, and even with, some glaring flaws of why wouldn't technology work, she doesn't ever really go into it. It just doesn't work because Hermione said she read it in a Hogwarts of History. And, okay, there we go. And, just like the little things, I probably have read too many forums about it, but, as a whole, as a, fantasy world, it is, quite well intelligently, put together. I have some problems, Quidditch doesn't make any sense, but whatnot. So, let's see here. Let me just look over my notes. One of the things that I kind of liked better as the series went on is that the Dursleys got to be a little bit more evil, but in such ways that I could kind of believe it. In the first one, they just seemed like evil for evil's sake of whatnot, and then the second one, they got abusive, but only after, Harry, continued to, defy their wishes, still is going to Hogwarts, still is, believing their immoral, in their opinion, an immoral lifestyle, and then is going, and then in their misunderstood opinion, because they don't know Dobby was the one who did the problem, then, he seems like he's going out of his way to mess up their lives, and business deals and what they're trying to do. So from book 2, at least book 2, granted it seemed a bit harsh, but it became, at least in my head, a little more understandable. Not that I agree with it, not that I think that that's a good way to parent, anything like that. They seemed like there was a bit more of a logic, betting to it that then the evil sprouted out of, as opposed to just, Uncle Vernon twirling his mustache of like, Harry Potter is evil, and I will oppress him. That they kind of did in the, first one. Which, a headcanon of mine is that this is Aunt Petunia, trying to save him, is, her motivation. Maybe not Uncle Vernon's, but hers is because she lost a sister to this magical world who got their hooks into her, and then, she started hanging out with the wrong crowd, which is, Snape in her mind of, these weird people, and, just it changed her, and she never got her sister back once they got their hooks into her. And so, one of the theories that I've seen online that I personally agree with is that she was actively trying to dementorize, trying to be a personal dementor to Harry. Which, if that was, if that could be made canon, that, she's that's what she was trying to do this whole time, I would find that, fascinating and awesome. But, it's just the little things like that of, because it is so focused on Harry Potter's perspective, you can kind of zoom out and kind of wonder about, what was really going on through this whole series. And so, that, having to narrow the focus is a double-edged sword, but I think J.K. Rowling used it very well, through the whole series. So that we can, keep the suspense going, not have too much information to the audience as opposed to the character, which is, Harry Potter, and to a lesser degree, Ron and Hermione. So I think she just did a very good job, with all of that. And so, I personally love the book, and I'm going to go through all 7 books and, or 8 movies. Try to, give a rundown, analyze, the pluses and minuses of, each one, do a movies, section of the video, where I talk about, kind of the major, major minor changes, and if there were pluses or minuses, because some of them, were quite good, and, were actually really creative of, how they used the movie universe differently than the book universe, for budget reasons. One of which that I really liked is that J.K. Rowling put down a Chekhov's gun, is what it's called, of, a piece of information that is going to be important later for the characters to find out, and then in the book form it never gets used. But then in the movie form, they pick it up and they use it, quite effectively of how it should be, how that kind of thing should be used. And, that difference, which honestly came about because of budgetary reasons. They couldn't afford Dobby in movie 4 as much, in the movies, anywhere near as much as, she used Dobby in the books. Then became, a better selling point for Neville. And it just, that kind of creativity, going between the cross mediums and not just, just doing a shot for shot as best you can of these long books, but, not only because you have to make changes, but then trying to make the changes good, for the most part in most of the movies, came out as strong. I mean, granted, they had to cut out a lot of things. There's no spew. My friend said he didn't even know that technology doesn't work in the Harry Potter world because he only watched the movies. He didn't, at least as far as I know, didn't read the books. And that's really all I've got to say about the series as a whole as an intro. I had some problems, with books 1 and 7, just because of how she was, getting into it, and for some reason she at the last minute, wanted to wanted to make these changes to her magical world in book 7, in order to try to get the battle to come out exactly as she wanted to, which I, have some problems with, wand lore, and, how the Deathly Hallows were supposed to work, and whatnot. So, but I'll get to that at book 7. So for right now, I'm gonna get to work and get Philosopher's Stone going. So thank you, and I'll be back soon.